Hey guys, this is Kenjido and welcome to another PaintShop Pro video. Today we're going to be covering how to create this sort of 3D rotating transform text effect. So before we get started, I just want to kind of cover the two real main aspects of this technique. And really, it's just about geometry is one and really gradient filling or sort of like a shadow casting is the other. So essentially those are the only two things we're going to focus on to be able to create this final effect. Now I'm starting with a black background just on a single raster layer. And we're going to be doing this effect on text. So we'll just bring up our text tool. And you can see I'm starting with just a white filled background material, no stroke. And we'll just type some text. And so then to make the text a little bit more in alignment with the orientation of the vertical, and then we're going to kind of stack them from left to right, I can hold shift and then just grab this middle part here and rotate. And then we'll just kind of place it somewhere for now. And so to create this effect, like the text is kind of going into the page, at least from the geometry aspect, we're just going to be adjusting the handles here. And so essentially if you hold control as you hold your mouse over the corner of one of these vector objects, we can simply just drag it up and you'll see that even the icon kind of gives you an indication of what it's going to do. It's a trapezoid type manipulation. So you can see just doing that, it creates this sort of sense like, there's a bit of depth, there's a bit of perspective. Now, one thing I do want to point out that in this particular case, we're wanting to have the wide side to be consistent across the image. So in this case, what I ended up doing was shrinking the side that I wanted to be smaller. But if you wanted this to kind of arc out more, then instead what you would do is actually make it wider on the wide side with each copy that you do. However, in this case, because we want the final shape to be somewhat square, we're just going to shrink the inside. So now that I've made one, I can very simply just copy it. And then I can paste that copy by pressing Ctrl G. And this will kind of give me some freedom as to where I can put it. I'll just line it up for now, and then we'll do some actual meaningful alignment later. So just by clicking, you can see that it puts a copy there. It's just another vector object within the same layer. And so since we're trying to change the perspective to make it seem like it's, leaning even further, right? Like almost like as if we're looking at a fanned rotation of this text. The only change we really need to make is to kind of squish this thing. And how far you squish it really is just going to depend on how dramatic you want this rotation effect to occur. And we're just going to repeat this a couple more times. All right, so here we can kind of get the feel that it's kind of like, that rotation. And all we've done is just played with the geometry using the pick tool on each one of these text vector objects. Now, like I mentioned, it would be nice to kind of have them all aligned more perfectly. So if we just select them all and then say, I want to align these vertically on the canvas, then you'll see that it kind of shifted all of them and put them right in the middle. So now we've covered the geometry aspect. Let's take a look at the gradient fill aspect and how that affects things. So if we just pick one of the text objects, and since we want to manipulate its fill, we need to make sure the text tool is actually selected. And then we can go to the fill material, left click on it, and then we can go to gradients. Now there's a lot of things that you can do here, but in this particular case, really what we want to do is some type of white fade, or at least that's what I want to do. And I want this fade to kind of follow the perspective. So since as the text is getting smaller to the right, I kind of want the original luminance of the background to show through there. So you can see here now with this particular gradient, I've got the white kind of fading off into the distance. So if I hit OK and then come back. Now we'll see that it's got that sort of, not only does it have the perspective shift, but it's fading out in luminance, almost as if it's kind of like fading into the darkness. So now let's say I don't appreciate too much the fact that this thing is fading so much and I'm kind of missing the very bottoms of the letters. So what I can do actually is click on that once again, bring up my text tool to make sure that I'm modifying the text object, go back to my gradient, and then here I can kind of modify that gradient, right? I could make it so that the transparency doesn't quite go so far. So that way at least I can kind of get most of the letters, most of the parts of the letters showing. And this is going to modify the current gradient, and I can say yes. Perhaps I'll call it white fade 2. And then we can see, okay, it has that same gradient effect, but at least I've got my letters kind of shaped all the way down. So then real quick, I'll just update all the rest of them with that same material. In hindsight, probably should have set the material first before making all the copies. Okay, so now we have all of our text, geometry is modified. We've added the gradient to give it that sort of like lighting, as if there's lighting hitting it in such a way that it's fading off into the depths of the image. And just for composition purposes, perhaps we want to duplicate this whole layer, and then we can move it over, hold shift and rotate so that it's kind of got this sort of mirroring effect. Then we can kind of select everything and then move it maybe closer to the middle. And there you have it. Quite simple and straightforward technique, but just something you can do if you want to create sort of a 3D fanning perspective effect with text or any kind of vector object in this particular case. So that's it for this one. As always, if you have any questions or would like to suggest content, feel free to leave a comment. If you'd like to get updates of new content, click the subscribe button. And if you'd like to support me in the channel, check out my Patreon page, which is on the link on the screen. Also check the description for other ways that you can engage, like my Teespring page. And I'll see you guys next time.